member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, when I got up in the House of Commons to speak about the capital gains increase and what it meant for Canadian farmers, it was during question period. So I thought I would take a few moments here today just to explain to Liberals how farming actually works, because I don't think that they quite fully understand how it works over on that side, particularly when it comes to generational farm transfers throughout the family. So, Madam Speaker, now, we just finished harvest in Saskatchewan, right? So we plant the crop in the spring, and there's a little bit of work that goes on in the summer, and then in the fall we take in the harvest. And this happens year over year over year. That's the very simplified approach to how farming works. Now, farmland in Saskatchewan, for example, Madam Speaker, in 1996, the price per acre to buy farmland was about $360, $390 an acre. In 2024, it's $3,190 an acre. So when you look at how expensive it's gotten to buy farmland in this country, particularly in my home province of Saskatchewan, and then you bring in this capital gains tax increase from 50% up to 67%, it's when you do the math on it, the grain growers of Canada, the way they've calculated it out, when you factor in all the different variables that go into it, this amounts to about a 30% tax increase on the purchase of or the sale of farmland. Now, for farmers, they don't have like a defined benefit plan. They don't have a pension plan. Their retirement savings, Madam Speaker, is in the sale of their farm when they get to retirement age. And what we have here, now the Liberal member that's going to reply to this is going to get up and going to say, well, we increased the lifetime exemption to $1.25 million. And yes, that is true that they did do that. But even on top of that, when somebody sells their farm, once they clear that number, that's where that new tax rate kicks in. And that's why we're seeing the grain growers of Canada get it to about a 30% tax increase when it was 50% and now it's at 67%. That's where that number comes from. So when you look at the valuation of farms and the way it's gone, and I know people will say, well, good for farmers that they can sell their land for that much money and they can have a wonderful retirement. Well, the reality is the cost to buy farmland, the cost to buy your seed inputs, the cost to buy all the machinery, the cost to buy all the semi-trucks that you need, everything that you need on your farm or on your ranch in order to make your business run, the costs have skyrocketed exorbitantly. And yet the value that farmers get for the crops when they sell it on the market is maintained roughly the same over the years. There's fluctuations in the market because it is a global market. Prices go up, prices go down, what you can sell your crop for, what you can contract it for, but yet the costs are always going up and up and up when it comes to the machinery that you're buying, when it comes to the equipment that you're purchasing on your farm. So they have to pay off banks and their debts on the land. They have to pay off the debts on their machinery. They got to pay off the debts on their house. They have to pay all this stuff off with the money that they get from the sale of their farm. And the fact that the government is now going to be taking 30% more off of that, off of the top, how is somebody expected to be able to have a fulsome retirement when the government's taking 30% off of the top on this new capital gains tax increase?
Your Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I would like to begin this debate by explaining the why. Why have we introduced these changes to capital gains here in Canada? Firstly, the revenue generated from our changes to capital gains will help pay for many of the programs that we have put in place. And I'm thinking, amongst others, of course, of our National School Food Program, which aims to help vulnerable children that don't have enough to eat in order to help them learn, Madam Speaker. I also would like to point out another reason, and that's because our government believes that hardworking Canadians that make a salary, that get their revenue from labor, should not pay a higher rate of taxation than those Canadians that make their money off of capital. We do not believe, I do not believe, in having wide disparities in the way labor and capital are taxed. And I believe, our government believes that income inequality needs to be addressed. And this policy, as well as others, such as our luxury tax on boats and on private jets, aims to do just that. Madam Speaker, this morning I had the opportunity to attend a roundtable hosted by Oxfam on the issue of tax fairness and how to address the growing gap between the wealthiest and the poorest in our society. And while I could spend much time, my entire time and more, explaining the discussion of today or listing figures about how under the current tax system a nurse or a school teacher could pay a higher tax rate than somebody cashing in their stock portfolio, Madam Speaker, I could also talk about Canadians the Canadians that will be affected by this change have an average income of $1.4 million in any given year, Madam Speaker. I could also detail how middle-class families, small businesses, and yes, farmers will be better off under our proposed changes. I've done all that before and I will do it again. But today I would like to talk about something a little bit more personal. I represent the riding of Outremont, which includes the neighbourhood of Outremont, but as well Côte-des-Neiges and the Mile End and Plateau. And these are really neighbourhoods that represent the microcosm of Canada. We have strong linguistic duality, many ethnic and religious communities, and we have wide disparities in income and wealth. If you look at average income, Madam Speaker, my riding is slightly above average, rounding out at the top 100. But when looking at median income, my community is ranked as the 25th poorest in the entire country out of 338 ridings, the fourth poorest in all of Quebec. And this is very visible on the ground for me. From the beautiful homes that line our gorgeous Mount Royal, amazing views, beautiful parks, to the old and sometimes dangerously unmaintained apartment buildings in Côte-des-Neiges, next to the rumbling of our urban highways, the distinction could not be more stark or more visible to me. I would like to be very clear. I don't begrudge for a second those living in a beautiful house in Outremont. I live in a beautiful house in Outremont. Just like I don't pity those living in the apartment blocks in Côte-des-Neiges, I was born in a one-bedroom apartment in Côte-des-Neiges. And I had such a beautiful childhood in that neighborhood. But I believe that everybody deserves a fair chance, and everybody deserves an opportunity, and one that might be just a little bit easier than the one that I had to fight and claw for. And that's where the federal government can and should play a role. That is what fighting for tax fairness is all about. Because you see, Madam Speaker, all boats rise with the tide. All Canadians, including those Canadians who will pay capital gains, will benefit for creating opportunities for other Canadians.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, Madam Speaker, yeah, all boats can rise with the tide, but they can also all sink with it too when you look at what they're doing with the capital gains tax increase. Let's look at what they've done for farmers in their 9 years. They're raising taxes by 30% with this on farmers. That will not make farmers better off. They are hammering them with the carbon tax that they are going to be quadrupling very soon here. And farmers will be paying tens of thousands of dollars every single year, and they will not get that back in their phony rebate program. They have looked at trying to label beef as being unhealthy. They were warned in advance and didn't even bother to put an application to get the BSE designation for Canada removed when they had the opportunity to do so a couple of years ago. You look at the fuel regulations that they're going to be implementing that are going to be detrimental to farmers. Farmers will also be paying a higher rate of tax because of the fuel regulations. You look at the way that they've been posturing around fertilizer reductions and what they're trying to do with that. They've done nothing but assault Canadian farmers and Canadian producers when they're the ones who are tasked with feeding the world their track record.
Well, Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. By ensuring that high profits on investments not be taxed at a lower rate than Canadians' paychecks, we will not only be creating greater fairness, but we will also be increasing our capacity to invest in a growing economy that will help all generations. This is an important stage in our government's plan to build a Canada that will work better for every generation, where young people can do well, be fairly paid for their hard work, and to ensure that they are able to buy or rent their own home, where everyone has a fair opportunity to have a good life. throughout the country, and that's exactly what our government is doing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.